So I've made it to week 2 of NaNoWriMo. Last week, I had hit a wall in this Cinderella retelling where I had gotten to the point in my outline where I knew what was happening and kind of how it was happening, and I got to the point where I didn't really know what the next step was. So I spent last week trying to plot, and by doing that, I did get a few more scenes in, but I kind of want to walk you through the process that I did to get to those scenes. And so what I did was I spent a couple of sessions just going over who my main character was, kind of getting deeper into her flaws and who she is as a person, and kind of what kind of backstory she has. And I also dug a little deeper into the magic system of this world, and I really like the idea of it being tied to nature. So like anytime you see nature in the city, it's kind of like a little red flag for like the people that hate magic, that might be like a little magic spot. It could also be just some nature. But I dug a little deeper into the main character, Astoria, and then also the character of Talon that I made. So it's kind of like her best friend. But I've got to that proverbial wall again because I got to the point where I had kind of plotted through this past week, and now I'm kind of at a wall again, the same wall where I've gotten to the end of my outline, and now I don't quite know what the next step in the book should be. I kind of have an idea of what I want or kind of where I want to go, but I don't have a clear idea of how to get there. I've introduced I think I named him in here, the handsome stranger, because I don't have a name yet, who is secretly the prince that our Cinderella character meets without knowing it's the prince, and he meets her without knowing that she's the assassin that tried to kill him, and then they end up having to work together. Because one of my favorite tropes ever in books is when like the criminal and like the royalty have to work together for a common goal and end up like, learning about each other and being friends or falling in love or whatever. Love it. Love it so much is my favorite. But I also, while I was trying to walk myself through this, like what I wanted to happen, I had the idea to tie this story in to another work in progress that I have that I've had for a while. It's also kind of the same setting of high fantasy magic is tied to nature, but the plot is a little different and it follows somebody else. So, like, what if the royal family from that book is the same royal family as in this book, and the events of this book then trigger the beginning incident of that book? So then I was like, okay, how can I kind of just feather these two stories together? Which is really, it's easy because they take place in different places, like in the same world but different cities with different characters. Except for one character who's kind of a big player in that one, but not really on screen all the time, is going to be a main character in this book, like the same prince in both books. I thought it was brilliant. And I know that's it's a very vague description of that other book, but it's still kind of in the drawing board, kind of. Like it's not quite in rough draft stage anymore, but it's in a very messy first draft stage. And I know if you can see like my word count down there, I am at 31,000 words, but that is including like everything in this document. This past Saturday, I churned out just over 7,000 words. And then no, I came back. I did 7,000. Then I came back later that night. I think I did about another 1,000. So altogether, somewhere around 8,000 words. That is excellent. I think the most words I've ever written in a single day is either 10 or 11,000. I don't remember, but that is a very rare occurrence. So I know like the odds of me writing 7,000 words next weekend, not very high. But I mean, I'm going to try because what I'm going to do this week is try to figure out where I need to go next and kind of walk myself through a very basic outline of this happened and this happens and this happens. What if this happens? And then, well, what if this happens instead? Just trying to walk myself through what needs to happen and what can happen. So then I can figure out the best way to, or what feels the most natural for the story also. One thing I did hit, like kind of stumbled into, is that feeling where like you introduce a character and you kind of tie them in, but then you have this idea like, well, what if that's this other character? But then you're trying to figure out if you've made the best choice. I almost said the goodest choice. It's Monday night. I didn't sleep well last night. I forgot to turn my clock back, so it went off at 5 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. And then also last night a clock fell off the wall, woke me up, I don't know, like 2, 3 a.m. So like I got woken up twice and then was wide awake because I thought like, oh no, somebody's breaking in. No, it's just a clock that fell in the middle of the night. So that's where I am mentally today. Sleep deprived, and I also had to go to work. And then I also have to get up early tomorrow to go vote before work. So my goal for this next week is to figure out where I'm going from here. Because I've introduced the idea of like the fairy godmother character, like she's just like a witch in this world, but like witches are very frowned upon, so they have to go into hiding. And so the Cinderella character has met the prince in disguise character. So they have met. They don't know who each other is yet. So then I've gotten to the point where they are going to talk to each other for the first time and like figure out that they have common goals and to kind of not really blackmail each other, but kind of force each other to help the other. And I haven't figured out the details of that yet, of how and why, because the Cinderella character is supposed to be sick and like bedridden, so like nobody really sees her. But she's I also have her cleaning in her parents' house and like doing in her stepmother's house and like doing chores and stuff with the other servants. So I'll have to figure that out somewhere along the lines of like what exactly is her role in the household that she lives in, aside from being the assassin. I don't know. And that's okay because this is a rough draft. We are just building a rough draft off which everything else can develop from. And without that rough draft, you're not going to get a first draft. Like no book was ever written in rough draft form and then like is perfect the next day. That's not how it works. And I'm sure some authors are much different than me at this, but like my rough drafts are always messy. My first drafts, my first and second drafts are like I'm like cutting out entire characters, I'm combining them with other characters, I am adding scenes and like side plots, and I will probably do like an entire draft later on just to figure out. I will probably do a draft just to figure out like the magic system, just make sure it's consistent with what I've already got in that other story. And I will probably have a emotional come apart where I don't think these stories need to be connected. I usually go through that if I attempt something like this. I feel like that's normal, at least for me, to have the mental breakdown somewhere in the middle. See, the writing process is a lot like you're like the structure of a book. You got your act 1, act 2, and act 3. Act 1, everything's happy and you got a lot of inspiration, you're ready to go on your big adventure. Then act 2 is you stumbling in this big adventure. And eventually you come to the breakdown that leads you into act 3 where you can see the end of the line and you know where you need to go and you know how to get there. You've learned the big lesson of the book. You have seen the glory that the book can be, and you're going to the finish line. Yeah, I just pulled that out. See how good that is? Yeah. Mm-hmm. You can quote me on that. See, I should have known that when I thought of the title, but like when I was making this outline, that something else was going to go wrong, that this was not going to be an easy book to write. Because I went into this thinking, oh, it's a Cinderella retelling. Easy. Wrong. And I did the same thing when I was doing the Aladdin retelling that I challenged myself to do that ended up being its own thing. And that book is basically done. I used it as kind of an experiment to enter the Kindle Vella space, which if you haven't heard, Kindle Vella is no more. They're pulling the plug because it didn't get the traction that Amazon thought it did. But that's a whole nother video. Basically, I'm not surprised that it's going away because it just wasn't a user-friendly platform. And this is me, who spent a lot of time on like fanfiction.net and like AO3 that both are very user-friendly. Kindle was not. And there was no way to like advertise other than like Facebook groups that were real sketchy. and that were basically like, you read mine, I'll read yours. That's not a organic way to get readers, and I don't like those kinds of things. I also, I'm coming back to the Cinderella retelling now, I also had a moment where I was trying to figure out the next plot of this book that I debated on whether I liked the name Astoria or not. Because you write it so many times and you realize maybe I don't like this name anymore, which I feel like is also normal. I've done that sometimes, not for every character, but for some characters. But I feel like it's already too late to name her something else because I've already named her Astoria. So she is Astoria. It's too late. But all in all, like I'm basically, if you're just looking at words, I'm halfway there. But if you're looking at the outline itself, I don't feel like I'm close to like the midway point. But I'm not really sure where the midpoint of this book is or how much of a romantasy I want to tiptoe into or just keep it just fantasy. It really just is going to depend. It really is just going to depend on how I feel when I get Cinderella and the Prince on the page and how sassy they end up being. I do like me some sass. But again, all in all, I think this NaNoWriMo challenge is going very well because I'm pacing myself. And I think that is very important, that you don't push yourself just to get words on the page, because then you risk burnout and then you're just not going to be able to do anything. That's what I did last year or the year before that, whatever year I was doing my Dark Academia Nano, that I pushed myself and I pushed myself to get words on the page. And then I could not write anything for like 6 months. I burnt myself out so much on doing a first draft or a rough draft. And even now, like 2 years later, writing a rough draft is a struggle. And I think it's just because I had to change so many things from the rough draft to the first draft that I'm focusing on getting it right the first time, which takes a little bit longer. It takes a little bit more puzzle piece rearranging. Goals for this upcoming week are to, figure out the next steps. How are the prince and Astoria going to be forced to work together to find the witch? Because that's their common goal. They're trying to find the witch because the story has discovered that someone has cursed her. I haven't figured out what the curse does or when she was cursed or how that connects to the prince or his sister, who he thinks is also cursed. The prince's sister is going to come in at some point because she has been accused of witchcraft and she is in a dungeon and he's trying to help her out. But the little details, no idea. So that's my goal. Also, there was something else I was gonna say, and it's gone. It's gone like a freight train. So I hope your nano is going along as well as mine. If not better. I wish you all the success and all of the words and all of the inspiration. And I will check in next week to make sure I haven't lost my mind.